Harry and Meghan heading for divorce. Hello everyone, welcome to Royal News Network. My name is Brittany, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the rumors and the stories floating around that Harry and Meghan have somehow signed a legal separation document, and they're just waiting at some point to actually officially file for divorce. And while I think that's an interesting thing to discuss, I don't think that's the case yet. Sorry to burst the bubble of some people, but I don't think that's actually what's happening. And it sounds like from something else that I've heard as well is that there's some sort of legal separation in terms of assets going on, that they're dividing everything into a very firm line, which does make sense. They are people with a lot of money, and that's what people with a lot of wealth do. However, I think there's something that we can analyze here, and something that I think is really important to understand about perhaps how Meghan is laying the inevitable groundwork for their divorce at some point, because I feel like Meghan, as much as she can, she wants to preserve and grab as many assets from Harry, from their business deals, that she can throughout their relationship. Because from what we've seen, Meghan really doesn't have anything to stand on except for the fact that she's connected to the British royal family. That is basically her claim to fame and her claim to money. So as they're going through this, and I do think they're having perhaps money problems. I think there's a lot of tension because I don't think some of their business things are going as well or as smoothly as they should be going. I would not be surprised if Meghan is setting up an apparatus where if something inevitably falls apart, she ends up coming out of it much better than her husband. And I'm going to give you guys a couple reasons why I think that's the case. But if you guys haven't been here before, my name is Brittany, and I provide compelling royal commentary on the latest news and gossip. In addition, I will be reviewing television shows and movies and doing a bit of history too. So if you love everything related to royals, this is definitely your channel. I do have a Crown watch party coming up too, as the 5th season premieres next week. So I can't decide whether I'm going to do it on the day of the premiere or the day afterwards. I'll have to look at my schedule because I'm actually going away a bit for the Veterans Day weekend. In addition, I made an announcement on my community page about a t-shirt idea that I was super excited about. At least the last time I looked, most of you guys were not super enthused about that. So what I'm going to do though instead, because I do want to create something that maybe you can buy, because I personally do love those kind of t-shirts. Hold on one second. The idea I had was a t-shirt with a saying on it. One of my favorite t-shirts is this one saying "I heart history." So I was going to do something kind of like that, but it was going to be the quote, "Thank goodness Meghan's not coming," because that was a quote from the Queen that we got in the Tom Bower book. But from what I saw, only a small percentage of people were actually that interested. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a survey through SurveyMonkey, and it's just basically going to be an opportunity for you to tell me kind of what you're interested in seeing, because I have a couple other ideas and I just am really excited about getting something together. So if that's something that is of interest to you, again, it'll be in the link in the description box down below, and you can go ahead and fill that out, and that will help me, because it's like hard because I have a lot of mugs and I don't get a ton of mugs, and so I don't know, and I feel like a lot of other people have a ton of mugs, so it's like I don't know if I want to do a mug. I like t-shirts, but not everybody likes t-shirts, and they would have been like fitted women's t-shirts with like a v-neck, so they would have been nice. And there's other options. Somebody mentioned an apron, so there's kind of a lot of options out there. So I want to try to create something though that I feel like works for a lot of people and something you can use or wear. That's what I'm focusing on. But before we get on to Harry and Meghan, I'll be doing a video discussing Will and Kate's visit recently to Scarborough and how they're changing the mold of royal walkabouts and what that could mean for the future of the monarchy, and how they're really trying to put cold hard cash behind their visits. It's not just cutting a ribbon and smiling and waving. They actually want to invest in communities, which I find really interesting and a really great way to go in terms of the future of the monarchy. And I think it also shows how really Harry and Meghan's idea and their piddly donations to things really are not as being as impactful as Catherine and William, who can donate 6 figures on a visit, which is pretty gosh darn impressive. Getting back to Harry and Meghan though, and this rumor, obviously it was something Lady Colin Campbell stated, and I was trying to look through and see exactly what she said, but the video was really long, so I wasn't able to view all of it. But I understand where somebody else got, and I believe this was Murky Meg who posted this, explained a Twitter post from someone which I thought made a lot of sense in this situation. So here's what it said. Legal separation is only financial. It protects their assets in case of lawsuits, etc. It has nothing to do with marriage dissolution. Two separate issues. When I saw that, I was like, yes, golly, yes, that makes sense to me. What we see with couples who have a lot of assets, look at Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady. If you don't know, obviously Gisele Bündchen, everybody knows who she is, but she married Tom Brady, who is a quarterback on an American football team. So between the two of them, they have a lot of money. She has actually more assets than he does because she was a supermodel, and he is, I mean, obviously he's a very, very successful athlete. And apparently he also has I want to say it was like upwards of $300 million, like 10-year deal or something with Fox News to commentate on football. So he has football that he's still playing. He has this deal in the wings that's going to get him hundreds of millions of dollars. She has hundreds of millions of dollars. And he had that level of assets too. And between the two of them, apparently they had upwards of $700 million that they had to split. But because they had an ironclad prenup agreement, when they announced their divorce, they were already divorced. They had already filed everything. Everything was kind of under lock and key. Everything was filed out. So they knew who was getting what. And they knew how they were going to divide things. Obviously, I'm sure there's still some things to work out in terms of property, because maybe he gets something and she gets something, and that could be not an issue too. But this happens with a lot of very, very wealthy couples, is that there's a separation of assets, especially if both are making decent amounts of money and they have separate business interests. They really want to separate these out so that they can both pursue their own things, and that somebody's flagging business doesn't necessarily become a drain or a liability on somebody's other successful business. Obviously, there's cases like in Victoria and David Beckham, where apparently David has bailed out her fashion line many, many times. The money he makes can offset the losses that she experiences. I don't know how true that is, but again, I could see that being the case. And this is what does happen in a marriage. You help each other out. But I feel like this separation, this division of assets is very telling where I feel like Harry and Meghan are. And there's a lot of complicated issues behind this, and some things are just generally, this is what you have to do to protect yourself, this is what you have to do for tax reasons. So some of it just makes sense generally in that area. However, I'm not sure that's entirely the case either. And like I said in the intro, I feel like Meghan is building a foundation so whenever their divorce comes, she can pull out of it with as much money and as much of their business as humanly possible. So one reason why they might be separating out their assets is for tax purposes. So while Harry and Meghan are living in the United States, they have to pay American taxes. Harry has to have a green card to make any money on American soil. So he has some sort of green card with him, and he is getting paid in American dollars, and he has to pay taxes here. In addition, Harry has to pay taxes in the UK because he is a UK citizen as well. So they will want his taxes too. That's just generally how this works. Even the IRS was going to go after Meghan after her wedding because she's an American citizen, and some of the things she was gifted, if they weren't gifted to the crown and were given to her personally, she may have to pay taxes on those. So this division of assets is a way for them to protect their financial interests before tax season is approaching us. Obviously, because the fiscal year for the IRS ends on December 31st, they're separating things out in anticipation of the end of the year and in anticipation of having to pay taxes next year. So if they can divide things in a particular way, hey, we may have to pay less taxes, we may have to pay less double taxes, we can figure out how to work the American system, the British system, and all people of a certain level do this. I'm not saying this is anything super unusual. The complex nature of their financial arrangements, I feel like, to a certain extent, are their burden because they didn't have to leave the UK. They didn't have to do that. But now that they're here, trying to make sure that they are paying the right amount or that they don't come under the auspices and the eye of either tax collection agency in either country, that's what Harry and Meghan have to do. So there's this very fine line they have to walk, and separating their assets into certain things helps protect that legally. And like that person on Twitter said, it's also a way to protect each organization from lawsuits. So if they create Archwell, the charity is one thing, Archwell Productions is one thing, Archwell Audio is one thing. If Meghan's interests are one thing, Harry's interests are one thing. If they're personally sued or if their businesses are sued, they may be able to protect each other and hide assets in a way. It is a way of hiding assets. Again, this is not anything a business wouldn't do. any other business wouldn't do, any other Hollywood person wouldn't do. They all have shell companies. They all buy houses, sometimes through corporations that they set up in order to avoid taxes or to make it a tax write-off. There's all these little things people do in order to have the best advantage that they can in terms of tax season, because obviously you don't want to be taxed too much or overly taxed when you could get a write-off in some way. Again, this is not necessarily a surprise. I understand some people will be like, hey, they should pay everything like everybody else, but we all want to get the most deductions that we can on our tax return. We all work towards these goals in one way or another. So I feel like saying that nobody's working towards these is kind of wrong, so it makes sense. But what I can see is the separation, in addition to it addressing the taxation issues and those sorts of things. It's a way for Meghan to consolidate perhaps some of her control over their assets and over particularly Harry's assets and what she can glean from Harry. So when they came into the marriage, allegedly Meghan had a net worth of $5 million. I feel like that was an overestimation because I feel like she paid, although she was actually paid pretty well, she was either getting the upper six figures or barely into perhaps the $1 million territory per year. What Meghan was doing, I think, and the drain on her money was giving a ton of money to Sunshine Sachs to promote her to death so that she could get as big a profile as possible given her minuscule role on this minuscule TV show that was not watched by a ton of people. Meghan wanted to constantly promote herself, and that costs money. So I feel like she was paying a lot into Sunshine Sachs with the idea of, hey, they'll get me on these bigger and bigger profiles. And that's what she was searching for. She was constantly trying to get to the next big thing. So paying a lot of money into something like Sunshine Sachs can confirm that, because the idea that she got to be in front of a group of people from the UN and speak, you just think of going, why? She hasn't done anything. She hasn't done anything. She has no merits to speak there. And a lot of actors and people who don't have a ton of merits do speak at big events. That's not what I'm saying. But she didn't even have the big enough profile as an actress for anybody to give a crap that she's giving a speech. That's just the reality of the situation. Not to deny her that the fact that she's able to give a good speech is just the reality of the situation. But Harry came into the marriage with about perhaps $20 to $30 million. And he has a connection to the crown, which means the Duchy of Cornwall, the Duchy of Lancaster could eventually pay Harry for something. So Meghan came into this marriage with a lot less than Harry. Again, I feel like the estimation of $5 million as her net worth was under. So when they came over to the United States, although I feel like they had grown their net worth a bit, Meghan had, in addition, I don't know, from all her backwards dealings, she probably had done that. However, Harry had the money. He had the money to buy then the house they now live in. They would not be able to buy that house except for the money that Harry had in his bank account. And it was probably about at least 50% of his net worth is tied up now in their house. And granted, a lot of people's net worth is tied up in their house. However, the amount of house they have, the amount of money I'm sure they're spending on it, in addition to security, in addition to housekeepers and nannies and all these sorts of things, is a drain on their bank account. So they have these huge deals with Netflix, Spotify, Better Up, and a couple of others. Now, looking at all these, Netflix and Spotify are the two huge ones. Who is actually producing content right now for Spotify? Well, as far as we know, it's only Meghan. So is Meghan taking all the Spotify money? Has she said, well, I'm the only one creating Spotify content, ergo I get all the money? And she's separating it out that way? That could entirely be the case. Harry's the only one with the Better Up contract. Does that mean Harry's getting all the money he can from Better Up? Perhaps that's how they're doing things. They're separating their assets out this way. However, the problem with the Spotify deal is that it was supposed to be Harry and Meghan together producing content. Because when they did their initial trailer, it was Harry and Meghan together. They did their initial trailer together. They did one single episode together where they asked other famous people to bring in things, and they sprinkled themselves throughout the episode and called themselves producers. And it was just such a lame attempt by the two of them to basically let everybody else and famous people who aren't dealing with the biggest ramifications of the pandemic, famous people to talk about and complain about their lots in life in terms of being locked down and all these sorts of things. So I feel like to a certain extent that was never a good thing. And I feel like Archetypes, while it's doing sort of well, I feel like it's not doing as well as it should. because she's only debuting in about 30 some odd things on the Spotify charts. And the issue is that she's not even on Apple. She's not on YouTube. She's not anywhere else but Spotify. Now, Joe Rogan has that, but he's getting at least 11 million views per episode. We have no idea if Meghan's getting anywhere close to that because her podcast is only available there. That she's still 30 some odd when her podcast is only available from one source tells you that that's a huge problem, because if you have a podcast through multiple sources, yeah, sure, you might be 60 on Spotify, but you could be 20 on Apple iTunes, and you could be number 1 on Amazon Music or something like that. Meghan's market is so small because she's only through Spotify. We have no clue how much her podcasts are actually being viewed. So that's, I feel like, is a huge problem. So although they have this deal with Spotify, I could also see Spotify not being happy. We have the same thing with Netflix. And I mentioned in an earlier video that Meghan, in her Variety interview, complained that she can't find anything. She scrolls through something. She even did this motion. We scroll through trying to find something to watch because she apparently and Harry can't find anything to watch. And then when she finally is pushed onto, well, I guess we watched White Lotus, which is an HBO product. It's not a Netflix product. It's an HBO product. So she's actually promoting a competitor to her own streaming service that's paying her apparently upwards of $100 million for her to talk about herself. In addition, you also had the fact that she already poo-pooed her own reality TV show that she executive produced, saying, well, it's not the story we wanted to tell exactly. Well, honey, that's your issue. And it comes back to, I think, the thing where Meghan is perfectionist, and the perfectionism in a way is that she has to nitpick something to death to the point where you can't do something because it's so been picked over that there's just even no recourse, no place to go, because she can't even, she nitpicks it to death that there's no future really in it. And what's interesting to consider about the Netflix and Spotify deal is that perhaps they're separating out their assets, knowing perhaps that Netflix or Spotify would sue them for breach of contract. Now, that's just a supposition on my end. Obviously, they do have their documentary coming, or the reality TV show coming through Netflix. I think that will debut later this month in November or in December. It could debut early next year surrounding the release of Harry's book, but I feel like they do, again, this is a marketing 101 thing. You do want to coordinate those two releases. So I could see definitely Netflix especially being frustrated that Meghan, not only did it take them so long to produce something, Meghan publicly poo-pooed their product, and she publicly poo-pooed their entire network basically, and could not even list a single original Netflix piece to tout in her interview, which she should have done. She talked about the kids shows, but what about the adult shows? It doesn't take that much, because she even said, you know, Magic School Bus was something her kids liked more, basically. So it comes down to this whole thing where I feel like Meghan, in the way, has been very, very unprofessional in these situations. If you are promoting a brand, you talk about the brand, you don't really talk about the competitors, and you don't basically publicly say that they're not able, you just scroll through because we can't find anything to watch. She could have at least said, we watched so much on Netflix, we run out of things, but they come out with new things all the time. So we're waiting for X, Y, and Z documentary or TV show. That's all she had to do. But she couldn't do it. And I feel like that puts them in an incredibly difficult and negative light, because their bosses are looking at them going, hey, we're paying you upwards of $100 million and you can't even promote our product well. That's a problem. What I found interesting too to consider is that I don't feel like we see Harry and Meghan much together or doing business things together. So when they went to the One World Summit, it was Meghan's thing. Meghan spoke. Harry was just there as a tag along, as a trophy to show to everybody, look at the gorilla I captured. Just taking some of Meghan Kelly's language. Look at this gorilla in the cage I managed to capture. How awesome is that? That was basically what his job was, is to just basically stand there and make her look important, because wow, she managed to bag one of the most eligible bachelors at the time. Although I don't feel like once they divorce, anybody will look at him twice anymore. He had the fun element to him. People liked him a lot, but any attraction, like, I thought he was cute, but not anymore. I don't really like men who have no backbone, who like trash their family publicly, who go on something like Better Up, which I really question them. Yeah, the attraction, whatever I feel like people had at one point, has officially died. Has officially died, and we can all thank Meghan Markle for that. She exposed Harry for the dullard he really is. So I guess we can all thank Meghan that way. But we don't really see them together in their business. So, for example, Spotify, it was supposed to be them together, but we only have Meghan, and where's Harry? We had the Variety interview, this gorgeous layout. Where is Harry? The cut, same things. Where is Harry? He makes brief cameo appearances, but the more you look at it, the more it seems to be everything's about elevating Meghan. Everything's about elevating her, not really necessarily him. If he does something, it's always together with her. So the Time Magazine article, and I feel like we've seen a couple other things. If it's something to promote him, it's always with Meghan. It can't be just we're promoting Harry. It has to be Meghan. So I feel like Meghan's focus is solely on promoting herself. And honestly, Harry is always going to be more likable than she is, because people have seen through most or a lot of her BS. At some point, my mom was saying something interesting. It's like, you hear her talk and she sounds so genuine. She sounds so invested in these things. And I'm like, yeah, she does. But then she goes and she talks about kindness, and then she treats her staff horribly. She talks about family, yet she won't talk to her own or let Harry talk to his. This two-faced image that she has basically portrayed to the world is something she can't take back unless she makes huge changes in how she's dealing with things. But I don't think Meghan is going to do that. And Harry, I feel like he's doing his own thing. So he has the Invictus Games, he has Better Up, but we don't know if he's doing anything separate for the Netflix thing. We've heard that they're going to do part of it on the Invictus Games, but it's unclear if that's going to be part of their reality TV series or if it's going to be separate. I've heard that's together, which I feel like is weird and doesn't make a ton of sense. Because don't you want to promote these soldiers, not just yourselves? But again, it's all about self-promoting Meghan. Meghan is the sole drive. And what this does is it separates her up as more of the maverick. So when they get divorced, she perhaps maybe has a greater footprint that she can rely on. And one of the other reasons I feel like this is not going to happen yet, I feel like it may happen in the future. I only ever gave them 5 years. But I feel like that's going to be extended because Harry's now so separated from his family. He's so separated from his former life. He's invested in all these business deals that perhaps have contracts that go on for years that he may not be able to easily get out of. But Harry and Meghan will definitely for sure make it to the coronation. I don't know in what capacity they'll actually be able to attend it as. I feel like it will be just as a personal guest, ergo they won't be wearing a tiara or crown or anything. I feel like that'll only be Catherine and William, or perhaps Catherine and William's children. But Harry and Meghan, they're in this very precarious spot where they want to allegedly create their own brand and create their own business, but everything they do ties back to the crown. Everything they do, they talk about the monarchy constantly. They talk about the family. Meghan has started to pull that back a bit. She did that a bit in the Variety interview, but they're trading off these royal connections. It's always like, have dinner with the Duchess of Sussex. It can't be just Meghan Markle. It has to be the Duchess of Sussex. Again, if she could point out Sussex on the map and tell me 5 things about it, I would be absolutely shocked. Totally shocked about that. So they have to make it to the coronation because they've tied their brand so much to the monarchy. They have to be there. And they have to be there together as a couple. Meghan would not get to go if she wasn't a member of the monarchy. I was disappointed to see that Autumn Phillips, Peter Phillips' ex-wife, didn't come to any of the Queen's funeral things as far as I could tell. And she was married into the family for a good 10 years. And she spent a lot of time with the Queen, and I believe she was well liked by the Queen. So I feel sad that she was not able to be part of these bigger events. Perhaps she was in the crowd at Westminster. Perhaps she was in the crowd at St. George's. And I really hope she was. But she's also very separated. And Meghan doesn't want that quite yet. Because again, Meghan, as far as we can tell, does not have the talent to actually create her own brand. Harry, I feel like, will be okay. He's still going to be the prince. He's still going to be the son, the brother, the uncle of kings. So Harry's line, Harry's place in the world is a lot more secure than Meghan's is. And that's why I feel like we see these desperate attempts by Meghan to continue building her brand by tearing down the monarchy as much as she could, having this saintly picture on Variety as if she's here to save the world. She's trying to desperately build her brand because she knows at the end of the day it could completely fall apart. And that's why perhaps some of this financial separation is going on. Meghan wants to secure as much of her assets as she can. She wants to make sure whenever they inevitably divorce that she comes out of it with more than he does, or that she comes out with some bit of his money more than she would otherwise. Because at the end of the day, Meghan doesn't have a lot to stand on. So she needs to desperately cling to whatever she can. And so I feel like this financial separation, which I do believe makes sense from a business perspective, makes sense in light of what other people in Hollywood do. But I also feel like it's a ploy by Meghan to secure herself, secure her assets, because she wants as much as possible to take. She has taken Harry away from his family, his home, his country, everything. And she still wants to continue to build up as much of her brand and money as possible so that when they divorce, she comes out on top. Well, guys, I really do want to hear your comments about this as well. Do you think they're close to divorcing? Do you think they'll divorce inevitably? Do you think that this is just a financial separation for tax and business purposes? Let me know in the comments down below. I will say that although I don't really have a ton of proof of what I shared in this video, but I will say my instincts are pretty good on some of these things because I was exactly right in how the monarchy would treat Harry and Meghan at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I didn't get it quite right for the funeral, but I was right in terms of how they were treated in the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which was, I said, if they go to the service, they'll be put as far away from William and Catherine and Charles and Camilla as possible. And that is exactly what happened. And they will be basically publicly kind of shamed in the public eye by being very much put in the background and very much put in their place. And that's exactly what happened. Same thing with them not being allowed on the balcony. So guys, I want to know your thoughts, so let me know what you think. Let me know about the survey. I would love for you to take it. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to watch the video with William and Catherine and their recent visit to Scarborough and how they plan on changing the monarchy. So guys, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye!